Welcome to the Charity Changemakers podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and action for the changemakers of the world. Each week, we dive deep into the world of impactful charities. We connect you with the passionate leaders, the innovative ideas, and the real-world stories that are making a difference. Whether you're a seasoned non-profit professional or just starting out, this podcast is your chance to learn from the best and get fired up to make a positive change. We'll explore the challenges and triumphs of running a successful charity. We'll hear about the fundraising strategies, impactful programs, and the stories of the people whose lives are being transformed. But most importantly, we'll leave you feeling empowered and equipped to take action in your community and the organisations in which you work. So, buckle up, changemakers, because we're about to embark on a journey of inspiration and impact.
Today on the Charity Changemakers podcast, I'm joined by Tim Lockwood, who's the Chief Executive of Headway, Southampton and Wessex. Tim's got an absolutely fascinating career journey that he'll share with you, starting in retail, moving into working as a police officer, and then into local church ministry in the charity sector. There's loads in there and lots that he will share insights on what he's learned in these different sectors and how they help in his leadership today of within the charity sector. So without wasting any more time, let's get on and meet today's changemaker. Really pleased to be joined by Tim Lockwood today, who's the Chief Executive of Headway, Southampton and Wessex. Hi, Tim. Thanks for coming along.
Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's great. I'm really excited and looking forward to the conversation that we're going to share together. Particularly, really exciting and varied route into the charity sector. I think you're probably the first person I've spoken to who's worked in the police force, but we've got retail and church ministry and all sorts in there and in your journey. So lots to unpack and explore together. But as we do with all these podcasts, love to start off with some quickfire questions, opportunity for the listeners to get to know you a little bit, Tim. So tell me, where's the best place that you've ever visited?
I've been to a few, so it's a bit of a tricky one, really. I think Oldham in Norway is one I fairly recently visited, just in the Norwegian fjords.
Yes, absolutely
stunning. It's got the mountains, you've got the cascading waterfalls, you've got the beautiful valleys, crystal clear water, absolutely stunning. And I think that's there. Definitely up there with one of the best ones.
Yeah, amazing. It's on our list of places that we want to get is to Norway, but not quite pulled it off yet. So that's amazing. Great to hear. So next quickfire question for you. Outside of work and the stresses of work and the challenges of work, what do you like to do to relax?
I don't know whether it's particularly relaxing, but I'm a Saints fan. So depending on how the Saturdays look will depend on how relaxed I am on the afternoons. But big Saints fan, have been for quite a while, been a season ticket holder for years. And also as a family, we work with the academy players. So we host the academy players. We're a host family. So the youngsters come and stay with us while they're training. And we're just a bit of a family away from a family for them. Yeah, so one of my claims to fame is our first academy player was Nathan Teller, who has just won the Bundesliga with Bayer Leverkusen. So so it's great. He's a lovely lad, and it was great. He came to us when he was 16. So
oh, amazing. Anyway, he's had an amazing couple of seasons, hasn't he? Obviously with
brilliant.
Burnley, and then
fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, indeed. Obviously, we're recording this pre-playoff final as well, aren't we? Yes. By this time next week, you might be really happy or a bit down in the dumps.
I'll be either relaxed or not, depending on that result.
Yeah. Well, we fully behind Saints here, and really hope that they do well. Just Sheffield United fan, and really want the Yorkshire derby with Leeds next season. So,
good. So do I. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. Yeah. And last question then on the quickfires. What are you reading at the moment?
Not a massive reader. I think one of the last books I read was a book called Battlefield of the Mind by a lady called Joyce Meyer. Just about how you think about things, taking control of your thought processes, certainly negative processes that can often come in. Really good. It was a good book, one that I think will last with me for a while.
Yeah. No, that's great. Lovely. Well, thank you, Tim. That's really helpful. And as we know, look, this podcast is all about exploring how people found their way into the charity sector and how that came about. And you've got this really interesting career journey. When I, stop and look at where you've been and where you come from retail to, like, say, working in the police to church ministry and in local charities. So, yeah, talk us through about that sort of career journey a little bit.
Yeah, I'll try and condense it down. It could be a long one, but I'll try and keep it as less boring and quick as possible, really. Yeah, I went into retail at a very early age. So basically straight out of college, became the youngest retail manager for what was a firm called Safeways back in the day, as a supermarket chain. So did that for a few years. But for anyone that's involved in retail, you'll know the hours are just awful. And certainly from a management, when you're a retail manager, you're putting in lots of hours. So as soon as we started having children, I kind of looked at what that next role would be for me, just to allow myself to get that work-life balance right. I always wanted to be a police officer.
Yep.
Got pictures of me as a kid with a bobby hat on and riding around in a pretend police car. So so I went for the police and got into the police. Spent 9 years with the police. Eventually getting to a point where I was working for a new government scheme. So I was working for the Home Office on behalf of Hampshire Police, and they were introducing a scheme called the Prolific and Priority Offender Scheme, which I think now has evolved and developed into the Integrated Offender Management Scheme. But back in the day, it was the PPO scheme. And so which was a different way of looking as a police officer, because my role was like a carrot and stick. So it would identify the worst offenders. Right. It worked out 0.5% of offenders caused 10% of all crime, which, if you're a police officer, you totally believe that stat. But what the idea was is to work with those 0.5 offenders, so those that were causing the most disruption, and try and deal with the triggers that were causing those offences. So it's a carrot and stick. Right. The carrot being that I'd work with youth offending team, probation, local councils, other charities to try and positively impact the reasons why they were committing offences. Right. The stick was to work with the Crown Prosecution Service and to make sure that if they continued offended, they'd get maximum sentences. And then I'd go into prison while they're serving those sentences, build a relationship, and try and get them out of that lifestyle. It was all about going for the lifestyle and disrupting the lifestyle as opposed to actually prosecuting the individual. So really different for a police officer to work, but I absolutely loved it. I got to know those offenders, I got to know their families, I got to know their circumstances, got to work a lot with local charities with that in mind as well. While that was going on, I'm a committed Christian, so I was also involved in my local church, and eventually there was a lot of, for those that work closely with church, you'll know it's not just Sunday mornings. Church is pretty much a charity. It's an independent charity in its own right, many churches. And there's a whole community arm to everything that they do as well, and looking at helping the vulnerable in the community. So I was tying the two together a lot, and eventually an opportunity came to lead the church that I was a part of, which I felt actually I could do that, and actually I could then still do part-time policing. So for a while I was a part-time minister and a part-time police officer, ran the charity that the church was involved in, and also linked with the police. So I actually ended up doing quite a lot of police community work, almost with both hats on. It was, some of the people got very confused. I was ministering and helping them one minute, and then, they recognised me as a police officer the next. But actually really, really enjoyed that, and a church, we saw a lot of success through that. A church in Guildford saw what we were doing and wanted to do something similar, so approached us, and eventually we moved to Guildford. So I let go of police work when I did that, went full-time into charity work up in Guildford, and did that for 6 years. Eventually my daughter wanted to return back to the New Forest and close to the sea. So it was at that stage we decided actually we'll move back, and also it was an opportunity for me after 13 years of being a leader in the charity sector, just have a bit of a break. So for a year or 2 years, I kind of went and just got involved with fundraising with Pelican Cancer Foundation, which was in Basingstoke, or is in Basingstoke. So did a bit of that for a little while. Really enjoyed just being part of a team as opposed to leading a team for a while.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit, and after the pandemic, I saw there was an opportunity at Headway Southampton, and felt that was the right move for me to go over there as chief executive.
Yeah. And was that time in the police force, so that's kind of the programs that you were running there, was that kind of first exposure to charity sector and experiencing, that partnership working and the way in which different organisations were supporting in a variety of different ways for those offenders?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, obviously being part of a church, I would always be volunteering in different community activities. So I kind of always had that element around me and was always conscious of that. And it was the first time I could merge two job roles and actually areas of influence together. Yeah. And I think with the police, obviously, it's very much, everything is very corporate in many settings, very professional in the way they do things, with lots of external bodies checking up and different other things. So actually to have that authority as a police officer and then marry that with the connections that I had within the community sector was great. Actually, for those years I was doing that, it was brilliant, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and two very complementary roles, aren't they? In that community-minded, community-focused.
You wouldn't have put the two together naturally. I mean, I remember doing sort of press releases, and the guys coming, the reporters coming and saying, "Well, we've never experienced a police officer and somebody who's running community events at the same time." Normally, if you're a police officer, you're into prosecuting. If you're a community worker, you're into helping, but actually merging those two roles at that stage was quite a new thing, and it was a privilege to be a part of, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of these things obviously led to that move into, you say, the fundraising role with Pelican, took us through that time and that opportunity to be in just a fundraising focused position.
Yeah, it's really good. My initial thought was to kind of semi-retire, to be honest, because we brought property while we were in Guildford, and we've got lots of income streams that we're involved in. So property is one of those. So my thought was just to kind of sit back and just relax when we came back for a little while. But I got bored after about 3 weeks. I think I'd watched Walking Dead box set and a couple of other box sets, and I'm like, what do I do with my life now? Yeah. So I saw there was an opportunity coming at Pelican Cancer Foundation, and I went and visited, saw Sarah, who was the CEO at the time over there, and just felt it was a really right opportunity, and it allowed me to use my experience in working with the community, not just to raise funds. I didn't see it as necessarily just to raise funds for the charity, but it was more expressing and communicating the vision and desire of the charity. And naturally, the knock-on effect of that meant that people brought into the objectives of the charity and wanted to give towards it. So did a lot of communities, a lot of Charity of the Year events, a lot of fundraising events. We did fun runs and all sorts of stuff. I think we had foam fun runs going on at one stage, and just all activities. But for me, it was great. As a CEO, sometimes your view is an overarching view. It's good just to be right in the middle of it all, making it happen. And as I say, just being part of a team rather than leading a team was quite nice.
Yeah. And was there indeed. And was there a fundraising team around you, or were you sort of sole fundraiser in that role?
Just volunteers. So one of the roles was to get a team of volunteers. So we had quite a great team, actually. We managed to get volunteers coming in. A lot of them were retired, which was brilliant because we could then put different expectations on them. So I would have different people doing different roles within the fundraising. Again, you naturally begin to lead, and when it comes to the volunteers, and just having lots of different arms to what we're doing, really.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love that people are prepared to give up their time to come and support organisations in their local communities and work alongside and raising funds in a whole host of different ways. And I guess from your point of view, that opportunity really, I guess, rolling up sleeves and being right in the action day in, day out.
It's great. Coming from sort of a minister and having a team of, quite a large team in Guildford. It was quite a large church/charity that we were running. I just remember being dressed up as Santa once I'd sort of moved across, thinking, well, this is new. As we were looking at, I think we were doing a Christmas fun run. And we're doing some pictures for her. And I just remember being full out Santa Claus going, well, this is different. But it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed being right on the coalface, if you like, and as you say, rolling the sleeves up and getting involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, look, church ministry, having been there myself as well, I think it prepares you for a whole host of different scenarios and things. You never quite know what you're going to face on a daily basis, do you?
You really do. There's a lot of transferable skills in that role, absolutely.
Yeah, indeed. And also, I think from retail, and of course, you're policing as well. I think these are three different areas of work that will have set you up really well for the work that you're now doing in leading Headway Southampton and West Wessex, and the work that you're doing that you're doing there. So we've got this then transition. I mean, obviously, you got in the church and chief executive there of the charity arm of what was happening, but this move, obviously a few years back now into Headway Southampton as it was then, but obviously as we'll talk about, some expansion over the last few years. What was the motivation and the call and the moving behind that move then from a sole fundraising role back into that chief executive position?
I think I was getting itchy again. I got itchy feet. When you're used to managing an organisation, you can, if you're not careful, kind of look at ways, and you can think, actually, I would do it this way, and it isn't doing it. You miss the opportunity to be able to develop and create a charity, and I'm sure towards the end I was a bit of a nightmare to the chief executive over there, because I could see areas that we could develop and do better, and although it's good to be part of a team, thoroughly enjoyed that. I think when you're used to having an influence in a direction of a charity, you kind of miss that, and you can get frustrated because you see areas that you think could be done better. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But from your perspective, so I was beginning to get itchy feet, and actually, is my time now to begin to look at taking more of a senior role up again. And I was missing those times when I was able to influence as I used to. So, and also the pandemic hit. So the pandemic kind of forced my hand a little bit in the fact that Pelican had to restructure because funding was cut, and it was just a bit of a nightmare. So I had a temporary contract with Pelican, so that just naturally came to an end and didn't get renewed, which was fine. So I was just looking really and saying, okay, well, this is my opportunity to perhaps get into more of a role. I was tired of driving to Basingstoke every day from Southampton on the M3. Which is an absolute nightmare. So to see Headway Southampton, as it was then, the role come up just up the road from where I lived, it just seemed ideal. It was a smallish charity, a small team. I thought it'd be great to get back into that management area. And also, I'm still really active in church as well. So for me, it was sort of an almost ideal scenario. I could still be actively involved in church, and I'm still part of managing church activity as well as doing what I do at Headway, and also then to work at Headway. It was a part-time role, 3 days a week, so it kind of worked ideal for me. So that kind of looked like a good opportunity, and really pleased I jumped on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. When was it that you joined Headway?
It was right in the middle of pandemic, so it's August 2020.
Right. Okay. So we've gone through those first couple of lockdowns then, and I guess for an organisation going through quite a bit of flux, from a delivery of service point of view, presumably that was hugely impacted. I mean, do you want to say a little bit about the charity and the work that you do?
Yeah. So we work. We're now Headway Southampton West Wessex, so we work from Southampton right across to Salisbury and the Isle of Wight and those different areas, and we work with people that have had an acquired brain injury, and we also support their care networks as well, whether that be friends or family. And so we do that by having activity centres. We've got 3 centres that we now run. And also we have a direct service, which is like a digital service, stroke outreach service that allows us to be able to support more directly in regards to service users' needs.
And is that digital service, is that something that was new through pandemic?
When we took it on in the middle of a pandemic, obviously everything is closed. We only had one centre at that time. The Southampton centre had to close. We had a couple of staff that were working the restaurant furlough. Those staff were just knocking on doors just to make sure the really vulnerable service users were okay. They might do a bit of shopping for them and different other things. But what we started to do, like everybody else, we started to use at that stage a very new platform called Zoom,
Sure.
which we're all well aware of now. But at the time, I'd never heard of it. And so we started using Zoom and started helping service users to be able to use Zoom, really to combat that sense of isolation that many of them were feeling.
Yeah.
And people started to get used to it. We got used to using it as the whole world got used to using it during that year or two. And I think for us, as we came out of lockdown, we looked at what we were doing in lockdown and thought, actually, there's some transferable things here that actually work. Yeah. It wasn't all horrific. Obviously, it was a terrible, terrible time, but it forced us to adapt. It forced us to evolve. It forced us to look at new ways of doing things. Yeah. And what I didn't want to do is lose some of the lessons that we'd learned in the lockdown and just go, well, that was then. We'll go back to how it used to be. And so we put together a strategy that involved still using Zoom sessions, still helping people to connect to the digital world, which is obviously such a vital part of where society's at nowadays, really to help combat that sense of loneliness and that sense of isolation for people with brain injuries. So we put this to the National Lottery. National Lottery loved it. They gave us funding for 3 years, which is brilliant, considerable funding. So that then allowed us to be able to develop what at that stage was just a thought or a loose strategy into something that actually is able to help people. We literally now have hundreds of people that we're able to reach out to that join us on Zoom. We do digital training, not only on how to do Zoom, but to do shopping, to look at social platforms safely in order to create friendships, maintain friendships. We now have meet and greets that are happening all over the place. So we have a number of cafes across our areas where we just get people to say, look, let's just all meet here at any stage, and it's open for service users and family members as well. And it just creates what we've seen happen is friendships being created, not just in our centre, because the centre is only one arm, but actually this other arm means that we can have, I think we've already up to about 6 or 7 meet and greet sites each week. Yeah. We've got walk and talks, and also what we found is that where we could start it, it can be maintained by volunteers and maintained by people who actually, who are service users. And we kind of want to empower the service users, not only to receive, help that we might be able to give, but also to be that help for other people around them as well. So it's very much about empowering service users to actually start to produce their own meet and greet spaces and help out and, get that sense of purpose that comes. Because if you've survived a head injury, you're an incredible person. It's not an easy thing to survive. Your whole world changes. And, some incredibly inspirational people that we work with. All our people really are inspirational. But if we can help them to then help others, that creates that sense of purpose, which we found has been really good.
And you started off there by talking about, and we just we put the strategy together. I'm really interested in to kind of get what it's a really quick sentence. I recognise that building a strategy is not a quick it's not a quick process, particularly when you've got so many different stakeholders that that are involved. It would be interesting thinking about people here who are listening that are potentially looking at wanting to step into a chief executive role for the first time, about understanding that approach and things that work well, because there's boards of trustees, there's your staff, there's your beneficiaries, there's your funders, a whole bunch of different people that are always interested in and being a part of that conversation.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's nobody likes change. This is the thing. And I think the natural way of thinking, certainly when something like a pandemic happens, is how quickly can we get back to how it used to be? And I think the first thing we had to tackle was to get out of that mindset. We didn't want to go back to how it used to be. This is a once in a lifetime scenario that we found ourselves in. But actually, we think that this once in a lifetime scenario can actually bring positive change. We can find the positives in all the pain and the negatives that time brought. And actually, we might not get another opportunity to bring change. So really, it was a case of talking to the trustees, talking to the team, the leadership team, and saying, actually, how can we make what has happened? How can we turn the negative into a positive? and really just analyse what has worked well. There were some things that didn't work well. We're all on a massive learning curve during the pandemic. Some things didn't work well, but then there were some things that worked really well, and we just didn't want to lose that. So within that strategy, it's a case of you've got to sell the strategy. I think as a chief executive, you've got to be a bit of a salesman in a way. You've got to sell it to your team. You've got to sell it to the trustees. You've got to sell it to funders. But if you're passionate about it and you believe in it, and you've got a team around you that can question and have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Help you to develop it. I think that passion and that commitment then rubs off to others. So, and also you also need to look at the quick wins. I'd always say, being a chief executive, if you're wanting to bring change, find your quick wins, because if you can put a quick win in place, that boosts people's confidence that, you know, that what you're saying can work. If you're saying, right, in 6 years' time, this is the outcome, and that's a long time for trustees and investors and everybody else, and your team, your staffing, to wait to see an outcome. But actually, if you can break that down and get some quick wins in place. So, for example, a quick win. I mean, I had to come and change the culture. So the culture here was very much, very relaxed, but mixed up. It was messy. It was kind of like, let's just make it up as we go along a little bit. So one of the things that I wanted to do was come in and say, right, okay, let's make sure everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody's got responsibilities for certain areas of how the charity works, to create that ownership within the team. And, you know, one of the things that we did very early on was just turn some of the rooms around. So we just painted some rooms. There was no staff in offices, so we created one room for offices. So staff didn't just have to kind of dump their stuff anywhere and work wherever there was a spare table, but actually have set staff areas, set service users areas. And by doing that, it created a different feel in the building. And I think if you create a different feel in the building, it's not like it used to be. And I think there's something when it comes to the mentality that if you're walking into something and it looks different, that means something's changed. And that gives you an opportunity then to create a different culture. It's like stopping people from naturally sitting where they always sit whenever they come in. Just even a different seating plan means they have to think differently. We managed to get some early wins, which was great. That absolutely helped us when we put those changes in place.
And you've been there coming up 4 years. What's the impact been of those, you know, those changes about that, you know, I guess, you know, instilling that new culture, that professionalization, I guess, you know, is what you're talking about, in the way your approach and the way in which you were working, and that open and transparent team together, and, you know, in being able to impact the strategy together. What's the longer term or the midterm impact been in the 4 years that you've been there?
Yeah, it's been growth. So, you know, in the time, I think where we have evolved, and we're still on that journey of evolving based on where financially we're at. In many ways, you can look at the environment and see the fact that we're coming out of a pandemic. We've got a cost of living crisis. You know, charity giving general giving has gone down. There's all of these issues and problems, but actually, we've always wanted to have a mindset of saying, where's the opportunity in it, rather than where's the problem, where's the solution, what areas can we evolve into as it is now in order to make the most of where we're at. And so when the organisation went into lockdown, it was struggling financially. We were about 200,000 a year, so quite a small amount of money for what it was doing. We've come out of that, and 3-4 years later, we're pushing on 500,000 now, which is great. So that's our first target, is to push past that area. Our staffing team have grown, and people have brought into the process. And I think as a chief executive, your job is to get people to buy into what it is the charity's wanting to do and get excited about that. Our staff retention, we're obviously in the care industry, so staffing is been a massive issue. But yet, because we've always valued the staff, because we've always allowed them to be part of everything that we do as an organisation. They have open access to input into anything. They each have their own responsibilities. They each have their own service users that they're looking after and developing. We put reward systems around how well they work with the service users and achieving the service users' targets, what the service users are wanting to get out of being here. All of these things has allowed us to keep that staff retention, which has given us a foundation to then build off the back of. And as new people have come in, they've naturally come in and they've seen a team that enjoy coming to work, enjoy being a part of what we're wanting to do, can clearly see how we're able to help people, have those reviews and objectives clearly seem to be met. And so that gives a real sense of job satisfaction. And actually our retention has been brilliant. We've only lost a couple of staff, and that's for genuine reasons. The majority of staff have stuck with us. New staff coming in have stayed with us. And what I would say is we've got an amazing team, and I'm very grateful for each and every one of them. But it's the team that really allows us to progress and move forward, really.
Yeah. I think it's always testimony to the leadership within an organisation that can create that culture that people wanting to come back to work day in, day out, because they can see the difference that they're making in their role, and that's ultimately what motivates individuals, I think, that choose to work in the charity sector. And
definitely. I mean, we can't pay. We don't have the ability to pay what other sectors could pay. So it is that job satisfaction, that sense that they can make a difference. Which keeps us all motivated to do what we do, really.
Yeah. And the growth's, been, amazing to track and to watch and to see the work that you're doing there. I mean, obviously in the conversation here, you talked about when I joined Southampton Headway, it was one centre, and now we're talking about Southampton, Headway Southampton and West Sussex and more centres, and Headway's coming together, working together, mergers, acquisitions. What talk us through that journey as well, because that's fascinating, and one that I think we're seeing more of within the sector.
Yeah, I think it benefits both parties. So I think for some of these, so Headway Salisbury, for example, they were struggling with income, struggling to be able to sustain the service they were providing over there. A key member of staff was leaving, so that kind of caused major issues. The manager there. And so they kind of reached out to Headway UK. Headway UK said, actually, you're on the border, Headway Southampton, why don't you talk to them? And we talked, and it made sense for all parties. We had the structure in place that could easily be able to absorb Salisbury and the work that was happening in Salisbury and South Wiltshire. We had the policies, we had the review processes. We'd worked with local councils, so most of our funding comes through Southampton City or Hampshire County Council. They'd just got a contract with Salisbury Council. So we had everything in place. Rather than them having to recreate everything, we could literally just roll our policies and procedures over and naturally then absorb that new contract. And it's the contract really that gives that opportunity for growth in Salisbury. So we're able to then add that extra contract. We're used to working with local councils, and so there was a naturalness to how that worked. And also it gives you a larger region when it comes to trusts and foundations, or when it comes to trying to get people to fundraise. You're not just looking at a small area. You're able to look at a wider area, and the impact that you're able to communicate any funding will have is much on a larger scale than what it would be if it was just Southampton and South West Hampshire.
Yes, yeah. And have you seen growth then on that fundraising side, I guess, from more traditional forms of fundraising? I recognise local authority funding is stretched at the moment. I guess, you don't want to have that reliance on it.
No, it's definitely one of the risk factors that we've put in. Since COVID, really, we kind of knew our reliance was too much on those contracts. So I'd probably say 90 to 95% of funding came through those contracts. So one of the things we've looked at developing is multiple income streams, which is vital. So we've brought a fundraiser and a development manager in position.
Yep.
Whose role has had a lot of experience with fundraising, and that person's role is to build a separate fundraising strategy around the work that we're doing. And we've just seen that take off. So even this last week, we've just had 14,000 come in specifically for Salisbury.
Yeah.
That's on top of 5,000 that came in a month or two ago as well. So those are where there wasn't any fundraising. To suddenly have those figures coming in makes a big difference from a local level for a small charity. So so that's been brilliant to kind of see that begin to develop. We've obviously got that contract at the moment. We've only got a handful of people on that contract, but we wanted to develop that. Wanted to add more days to Salisbury. We're in the process of recruiting a Salisbury coordinator that can really focus on developing that side of the business as well. So, yeah, we have seen growth. It's still early days. The charity doesn't actually close, Salisbury Charity, until September. So we're kind of just giving it those extra couple of months. But from September, we'll then be just the one charity covering those two areas.
Yes,
so it's still early, but we're already seeing fruit coming out of that, which is great.
Yeah. And a centre on the Isle of Wight as well, is that right?
Yeah, really early days for that one. So it's more of a support group at the moment.
Okay.
So they were run by Headway UK, but they were just volunteers that were doing it. And I think the workload became quite considerable over there, and there was health issues and different other things that meant that the people that were running it couldn't do it anymore. So again, they sort of reached out and contacted us. So we're now putting a support group in place over there. I think our thought is it's one step at a time. We'll keep it ticking over Isle of Wight, centre over there, but we'll develop Salisbury in a year or two. That'll be then when we'll start to develop the Isle of Wight and build, hopefully get some contracts over there as well. Look at building all the different strategies there that emulate the strategies that we've got in the other two areas.
Yeah, I just absolutely love that. That's like sustainable growth. There's a vision, there's a strategy, there's a plan. And clearly board of trustees are vital in there, working with the charity organisation for that, ultimate responsibility for leading it. But I think you see where we've got engaged boards that are really motivated by the cause, that great things can happen.
The board are brilliant, and we've actually divided now into subcommittees, so all the board feel part of the charity. I think it can be easy for trustee boards to have members that kind of just turn up and once every 2 months or 3 months or wherever it is, but not actually be actively involved. I think one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that our trustee team, all of the team, felt that they were in a position where they could actively get involved and influence. We've been quite directive in how the board have in how they've recruited trustees. So, we're looking at service users being part of the trustee team as well. So the people that we're serving have a voice at the top operational end of the charity. So and that's been really good. We've divided into subcommittees. So we now have a finance subcommittee. We have a policy subcommittee. As Salisbury grows, we'll have the different subcommittees for the different areas that can then all begin to feed back into the wider team. So really every trustee has a responsibility for being on the board. They can't just sit on the board just because it looks good on the CV. They need to be an active part of what the board is doing, and there is that expectation put on them to be active in running the charity. I'd say another thing as well, just you were saying one thing about not relying on one source of income. I think two things that we've done as well is build the reserves up, which we felt was really important. So our reserves we put an awful lot of effort into building those reserves, because I think, especially in today's unknown stages of what the future might be, I think those reserves allow you to be quite agile in how you can change and transform. So we're making sure that no matter what happens, if the worst case scenario is the local councils go bankrupt, we don't have any income coming in, we have enough reserves to readdress who we are as a charity, and begin to look at ways in which we can again evolve to whatever that climate looks like, that financial climate looks like.
It's difficult to prepare for every situation, isn't it? But what you're demonstrating there from the board down is good stewardship. And I like what you're saying about actually we need members of the board who are taking ownership, and really involved in the strategy and and the organisation. And I think that's really vital in a smaller charity that's got ambition.
Definitely, I agree. Yeah, and they're great. We've got an amazing board. Yes. The chair of trustees is fantastic. I meet with him once a month. We've got a really good relationship, and literally every single member of the board is brilliant. I'm not just saying that because they're my boss, but
Yeah, sure.
they genuinely are great.
Yeah, and look, I think it's demonstrated in the growth that you've seen across Headway, in the last 4 years. I think that can only happen in organisations when you've got that alignment between board and the senior leadership in an organisation to then, instill that culture and that strategy across the whole team, and particularly when you're welcoming new team members and growing the team and growing your reach. So, and that's ultimately, I guess the outcome now is that you're reaching more individuals than you were 4 years ago.
Yeah, and that's the end. That is the target. Really, everything we do is to help people, and the more people we're helping, the better we're doing. Really, it can't be reliant on anything else. It is literally there to help people, and where there's a need, we've got to try and reach that need. That's the mindset we have, really.
Yeah. And as you reflect on your career to the point where you're at now, and the different industry sectors that you've worked within, what do you think, or what have been important factors in sort of influencing your leadership style? Your approach to leading Headway at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think it's the early days. Actually, I go back a lot to my retail management days where I made so many mistakes. I was in my early 20s. I hadn't really got a clue. I'd studied at college business and finance, but studying and putting it into practice is two different things. And I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity as a young man to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, because I think that certainly helped to develop me as a leader. And also working with teams to, even from those retail days with the targets, I used to hate targets, but actually it's those targets and allowing me then to work with my managers who I was looking after, giving them their own targets, and really, really looking at ownership was something that was really big for me, getting them to own the targets rather than me as a senior leader owning it. And how I did that and how I got their involvement, how I was able to open it up so that they felt they could input into what we were doing and all that sort of stuff. And as I say, I probably got more things wrong than I got things right, certainly in those days. But yeah, I kind of look back at that. And for me, it's all about building a team that can own the objectives. And that's something that's strong for me. I think it's easier to do it in a smaller charity. I think the larger the charity and the more layers of leadership that are there, it can be more difficult. But I think however we do it as leaders, we've got to allow the whole team to know that it has to be almost their vision, what they're wanting to see happen, and for them to get that collective sense of ownership is vital.
Yeah, I can't remember where I heard it, but the other day I was talking to someone or listened, or maybe heard it on the TV or something, but they were talking about actually your mistakes or your failures. They're a bruise. They're not a tattoo, so they don't they don't go with you. But you've got to learn. Clearly, you learn from them and adapt your style, adapt the way in which you do things. But you take just away as much from those challenges as you do the wins. Through your career.
Absolutely. They actually become really precious when you look back, because you think actually when the good times were great and we love success, but man, it's the failure that makes you reassess everything and question everything. But at the end of that reassessing and questioning, if you do it right, I think you can you get up a better person than you fell down, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people that work within this sector, I think, because there are challenges, there are failures along the way, you've got to be resilient. You've got to have that thick skin, you particularly when you're in a fundraising role and, you hear no probably more often than you hear yes. You've got to be able to work in that sense. But I think it's very easy, isn't it, to take it personally and to, be in that sort of pit of despair. But actually it's about, moving forward and striking forward.
I think being a police officer helped with that.
I'm sure.
It's amazing when you're a police officer, the criticism you get, but they're not really criticising you; they're criticising the uniform you're wearing. And I think you've just got to always have that in mind. In any leadership role, I think you have to have that in mind. You're naturally going to get criticism, but they're not criticising you as a person; they're criticising the role in which you're occupying. You can easily get offended being a leader or a manager, but it's just making sure that it's not keeping it personal. It's just making sure that it's the role that you're doing. It's professional rather than personal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you've shared through the conversation is that eyes are on the mission and the vision of the organisation and delivering against the strategy that's being put in place. Tim, if you could go back and speak to yourself at the start of your career and give yourself a piece of advice, from what you now know a few years into your career, what do you think you'd tell yourself?
I think I'd tell myself to relax. It's going to be okay. I think,
Yes.
whether I'm probably not the only one that thinks this, but you can be so, certainly in the early days, you're wanting to build something, you're wanting to grow something, and all your focus is on that. I think the one thing I'd say to myself is that, it's going to be okay. It's going to work. You're going to get to where you need to go. Enjoy the ride. I think sometimes we can be so focused on getting to the destination that we actually really we miss certain parts of the ride that can be really fun. So I think for me, it would be a case of you'll get there, just enjoy the ride, enjoy every moment of the journey, because there's lots of great stuff in that journey.
Yeah, perfect. Tim, I'm so incredibly grateful for you coming on and sharing your story and sharing some of your insights. It's been really inspiring to hear some of the ways in which obviously Headway has grown over the last few years and the work and the impact that you're having. But that whole thread of community focus and community minded projects, I think throughout the whole of your career has just been really inspiring. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today.
No point. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure just to come and chat. Definitely.
Yeah. No, that's great. Lovely. Cheers, Tim.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this week on the Charity Changemakers podcast. Remember, you can be the change you want to see in the world. We hope that this episode has inspired you to get out there and make a difference. This podcast was brought to you by Charisma Charity Recruitment, one of the UK's leading recruitment consultancies for the charity sector. Whether you're a passionate professional seeking your next challenge or a charity searching for a top-tier talent, Charisma Charity Recruitment can help. Visit their website at charismarecruitment.co.uk to explore their latest positions and to connect your organisation with the change makers shaping the future of a non-profit world. Thanks for joining us.